Let me ask you something. When was the last time you let someone else's words ruin your whole day? When was the last time you reacted, snapped, lost your edge because someone pushed your buttons? It happens to all of us. But here's the truth. You don't rise in this world by reacting to everything. You rise when you learn to act as if nothing bothers you. I'm not talking about pretending. I'm not talking about fake smiles and bottled up rage. I'm talking about real control, real emotional discipline, the kind that lets you walk through fire and not flinch. See, the strongest people you know, they don't look strong because they yell the loudest or fight every battle. They look strong because they've trained their mind to stay cool, stay sharp, and stay focused, no matter what. They've learned this one truth. If they can't get to you, they can't control you. This is not just a mindset, this is a skill. One that you build, one that you sharpen, one that will change how you walk, how you speak, how you respond, and how the world sees you. Today, I'm going to show you how to act unbothered. Not to fake strength, but to build it. To become untouchable. Not because life stops testing you, but because you've learned how to pass the test. So if you're ready to stop being triggered, stop giving people power over your peace. If you're ready to become the calm in every storm, let's begin. Most people walk around thinking they're in control of their lives, but the truth is, they're not. They're being controlled by their emotions, their triggers, the opinions of others, and their own internal storms. They get a nasty comment, and their whole day unravels. Someone gives them a dirty look, and suddenly they're spiraling. They don't realize it, but they've handed over their power without a fight. And the worst part, they think that reacting is strength. That showing emotion is proof of their authenticity. But if you want to become unshakable, if you want to lead, influence, and walk through life with real confidence, then you have to understand this. Control begins with emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is not about shutting off your feeling or becoming a robot. It's about mastering your inner world so completely that nothing on the outside gets to dictate what happens on the inside. It's about learning to pause between the trigger and the reaction, and in that pause, owning the moment. You don't let the world decide how you feel. You decide. And that level of control, that's rare. That's powerful. That's what separates people who survive from people who lead. Let's get one thing straight. There's nothing weak about emotions. Emotions are human. They're signals. But just like any signal, they need to be understood, not obeyed. You can feel angry and not lash out. You can feel hurt and not collapse. You can feel fear and still take the shot. That's emotional detachment. It's knowing how to observe your emotions without being owned by them. It's walking into conflict, pressure, even chaos, and staying rooted in who you are, not who your feelings want you to become in the heat of the moment. Think about the people you admire, the ones who keep their composure no matter what's thrown at them. Leaders, agents, operators, high-stakes professionals. They don't show up to the job hoping the day goes smoothly so they can feel okay. They train their mind to stay grounded whether the world is calm or falling apart. They've developed what I call emotional immunity. Just like your body builds up resistance to viruses, your mind can build up resistance to emotional chaos. And you do that by putting yourself through controlled discomfort on purpose. You don't get stronger by avoiding stress. You get stronger by facing it with the right mindset. Start with small things. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Don't react. Someone talks over you in a meeting. Breathe, observe, hold your posture. Someone throws shade online. Don't take the bait. These moments are your training ground. Every time you choose not to react, every time you choose control over chaos, you build your emotional muscles. You train your nervous system to respond with calm instead of panic. That's how you develop true inner strength. And don't think people won't notice. They will. There's something magnetic about a person who doesn't flinch, who doesn't take the bait, who doesn't give their power away. That kind of presence creates respect. People know they can't manipulate you. They can't get inside your head. You're not easy to rattle, and in today's world, that's a superpower. Here's what you need to understand. The world will always test you. People will provoke you. Life will hand you chaos, often when you least expect it. And if you keep depending on everything outside of you to go right in order to feel right, you'll always be at the mercy of life. But when you build emotional detachment, when you master your inner world, you flip the script. You become the constant in every equation. You become the calm in every storm. And I know it's not easy. It takes work. You've been conditioned your whole life to react, to defend yourself, to prove your point. to chase validation. But what if I told you the real power comes when you don't need to do any of that? What if I told you that not reacting is the most strategic move you can make? That silence isn't weakness, it's control. That when you stop needing everyone to understand you, like you, agree with you, you're free. Detachment isn't about indifference, it's about clarity. When you're emotionally detached, you don't get pulled into every argument. You don't get offended by every comment. You don't waste your energy trying to fix other people's opinions. You move with purpose. You speak with intention. You walk into every room already full, so no one gets to empty you. So ask yourself this: who's really in control, your emotions or you? Because if your emotions run your life, then anyone who knows how to trigger them owns you. That's a hard truth, but one you need to face. Because until you do, you'll keep giving people power they never earned. You'll keep living in reaction, and that's not the life you were built for. You were built for strength, for focus, for discipline, and that begins the moment you decide to stop giving your emotions the driver's seat. Start observing instead of reacting. Start choosing your energy instead of absorbing everyone else's. That's emotional detachment, that's mental toughness, and that's how you begin mastering your inner world. And once you do that, once you truly take ownership of your mind, there's nothing anyone can say or do that can shake you, because now the power is yours. And you don't give it away. Not for anyone, not for anything. Strength is not in the shout, it's not in the slam of a fist on the table, or the cutting comeback, or the loudest voice in the room. True strength, the kind that commands respect without saying a word, lives in control. It lives in the pause. It lives in the person who chooses not to react, not because they're weak, but because they've trained themselves to be above the noise. Most people think power is about domination. They think it's about proving a point, showing teeth, winning arguments. But that's not power. That's insecurity, wearing a costume. The strongest people you'll ever meet are not the ones who bark the loudest. They're the ones who sit still, eyes sharp, and say nothing. And in that silence, everyone listens. Why? Because real control makes noise without sound. It makes impact without force. It's not desperate to be seen. It already is. We live in a world where everyone is reactive. Something happens and people explode. Someone says something they don't like and they snap. They think a fast response is a sign of strength, but in truth, it's a sign of emotional fragility. If you can be pulled off center that easily, you're not in control. Your emotions are. And if your emotions are in charge, then anyone who learns to press your buttons can control you. But when you've done the work, when you've built yourself from the inside out, things change. You don't rise to every provocation. You don't feel the need to correct every wrong. You don't waste your time defending yourself to people who've already decided who you are. You stand still, steady, composed, not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your peace to let anyone steal it. Strength is quiet, because it doesn't need to prove itself. It's not desperate for validation. It doesn't seek revenge. It doesn't flinch under pressure, and that's what makes it so powerful. The quiet person in the room isn't always the weakest. Often, they're the most dangerous, because they're thinking, watching, calculating. They're not reacting, they're preparing. And when they move with purpose, not emotion. Control is louder than reaction because it echoes longer. A person who yells fades quickly into the background. They become noise, but someone who holds their ground, who speaks with intention, who acts only when necessary, those are the people who are remembered. Their restraint becomes their presence. Their silence becomes their signature. Because when you don't react, you force others to adjust. You become the standard. And that shift in power is unmistakable. Think about it. When someone tries to provoke you and you don't bite, what happens? They lose leverage. They lose momentum because they were counting on you to react. That was the game. That was the plan. But when you remain unbothered, when you don't flinch, you win. Not because you fought harder, but because you didn't need to fight at all. That's control. That's mental dominance. This doesn't mean you suppress your voice or never stand up for yourself. It means you choose your battles. You understand timing. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You recognize that reacting out of impulse costs energy, and your energy is valuable, so you protect it. You don't just let anyone have access to it. You guard your mind like a fortress. Disciplined, deliberate, and impossible to shake. The most elite warriors, the sharpest negotiators, the strongest leaders, they all know this. You don't win by being loud. You win by being unshakable. You win by staying calm when everyone else is losing their heads. You win by being the one person who doesn't panic, doesn't run, doesn't lose control. And that kind of strength, it's earned. It's built in the quiet moments. It's forged through discipline, failure, repetition, and self-awareness. You want to stand out in a world full of noise. Learn how to be still. Learn how to control your face when you're furious. Learn how to listen when you want to scream. Learn how to take a breath instead of lashing out. That's how you separate yourself from the average. That's how you command attention without raising your voice. That's how you become a force without becoming chaotic. The more control you have, the less you have to prove. You won't need to tell people who you are, they'll feel it. Your energy will speak before you do. And when you finally do speak, it will carry weight, not because of how loud it is, but because of how rare it is. Your words will matter because you don't waste them. So if you want real power, stop trying to prove yourself in every moment. Stop reacting to every trigger. Stop chasing the need to be right, to be heard, to be understood. Strength doesn't need all that. Strength is still. Strength is silent. Strength is knowing who you are and not letting anything outside of you change that. Control is louder than reaction. It always will be, because the world hears chaos all day long. But silence, the kind that's grounded, calm, and deliberate, now that silence cuts through, and when you learn to master that, you don't just walk through the storm, you become the one who brings the calm. Everyone has triggers, those invisible switches buried deep in your psyche that when pushed, flip your mood, cloud your judgment, and hijack your behavior. It might be someone interrupting you, someone doubting you, a certain tone of voice, a look, a memory. We all have them. The question is, do you control them or do they control you? Most people walk through life completely unaware of what sets them off. They just know that sometimes they explode. Sometimes they withdraw. Sometimes they say or do things they regret. And afterward, they justify it by saying, that's just how I am, or they made me feel that way. But that's the language of someone who hasn't done the work. Someone who's still letting their pain write their story. Someone who's still reacting instead of choosing. You can't live a powerful life if you're constantly triggered. You can't lead, you can't grow, and you can't earn respect if every emotional bump in the road knocks you off center. That's why you need to train your triggers. And I mean that literally. You need to study them, challenge them, and condition yourself to respond differently. Because the trigger itself isn't the enemy. The enemy is what you let it turn you into. Every trigger is a teacher. Every time something rattles you, that's a signal. There's work to be done. And the moment you stop avoiding that work, when you stop blaming other people, stop running from discomfort, and start asking yourself, why did that hit me so hard? You begin the process of turning pain into composure. Let's be clear, you don't eliminate triggers by pretending they don't exist. You eliminate them by facing them head on. That means putting yourself in situations that test your patience, challenge your ego, expose your insecurities. Not to punish yourself, but to build emotional resilience. This is called stress inoculation. You expose yourself to controlled discomfort, so when the real thing shows up, your system doesn't freak out. You don't get hijacked, you stay calm, you stay sharp, you stay in control. Think about elite performers, fighters, negotiators, first responders, elite agents. They don't become calm under pressure by accident. They train it. They get yelled at, pushed, doubted, and provoked in training, so that when it happens for real, their system doesn't collapse. They've rewired the trigger. What used to create panic now creates focus. What used to create anger now sharpens their awareness. You can do the same, but it takes commitment, it takes repetition, and it takes brutal honesty with yourself. Start by identifying your patterns. What consistently upsets you? What situations make you lose your edge? Be specific. When someone questions your intelligence, do you get defensive? When someone ignores you, do you shrink or rage? When you feel disrespected, do you immediately lash out? Those aren't just reactions, they're patterns. And they point directly to the pain you haven't dealt with yet. Your job is to get so familiar with those patterns that you catch them the moment they show up. That's the beginning of transformation. Next, you practice the pause. You create space between the trigger and the reaction. In that space, you breathe, you observe. You take control. You tell yourself, this moment doesn't own me, because the truth is, your nervous system has been programmed by past experiences. but it can be reprogrammed. And every time you choose to stay composed instead of reacting, you're building new pathways in your brain. You're training yourself to stay centered, to stay powerful, to lead with awareness instead of emotion. There's nothing soft about this process. It's not passive. It's war, internal war. You're going to face resistance. Your ego will want to fight back. Your past will scream at you to defend yourself. But every time you override that impulse, you're choosing power. You're choosing growth. You're choosing to become someone who's not easily moved by chaos. And here's the thing. People will notice. When they push and you don't move, when they poke and you don't flinch, when they insult and you remain composed, something shifts. You earn respect without demanding it. You set the tone without raising your voice because now they can't use your triggers against you. You've disarmed them. You've turned pain into presence. Over time, the things that used to bother you will start to feel small. The people who once had power over your mood won't even register. You'll move through conversations, conflict, and pressure with a quiet steadiness. And it's not because you don't feel things. It's because you've trained yourself to lead yourself first. And that's where all true leadership begins, with the ability to regulate your own emotions before trying to influence anyone else's. You can't always control the world, but you can control how you respond to it. You can't prevent people from pushing your buttons, but you can take the power out of those buttons. Every time you do, you become more centered, more powerful, more unstoppable. That's not theory. That's training. That's discipline. That's what separates people who rise under pressure from those who fold. So stop avoiding your triggers. Chase them. Study them. Train them. Let them show you where your work is. And then do that work. Because once you do, you'll stop being a slave to your emotions and start becoming a master of your mind. And from that place, there's nothing you can't handle. There's no room you can't walk into and own. Because now the pain isn't your weakness, it's your power. In a world addicted to noise, silence has become a forgotten power. Everyone wants to speak. Everyone wants to be heard, to be right, to have the last word. But very few understand the power of saying nothing, of choosing stillness over reaction, of using silence not as weakness, but as strategy. Because silence, when used with intention, can be the loudest thing in the room. It can disarm, confuse, command, and dominate without a single word. We've been conditioned to believe that winning requires speaking up, jumping in, making our voice heard at all costs. But real power doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to argue. Real power sits in the corner of the room, watching. It lets others talk themselves into mistakes. It listens. It gathers information. And when it finally moves, it moves with precision. Silence is not inaction. It's calculated, strategic. It creates space. It creates pressure. When you're silent in the right moment, it makes people wonder what you're thinking. It forces them to fill the gap. And often, when people feel that silence, they expose themselves. They reveal their insecurities. They rush to explain, to justify, to win. And while they're reacting, you're in control. That's the game. In negotiation, silence is one of the most effective tools you have. The person who speaks first usually loses ground. Why? Because silence creates discomfort. Most people can't sit with it. They get anxious, uncertain. They try to fix it with words. But if you can learn to be comfortable in silence, you hold the advantage. You're the one dictating the rhythm of the conversation. You're the one controlling the pace, the tension, the outcome. That's not passive. That's power. Silence also protects your energy. Not every battle needs your words. Not every insult needs a comeback. Not every opinion needs a response. The moment you realize you don't have to react to everything is the moment you take back control. Silence lets you choose where your energy goes. It lets you conserve your strength for what actually matters. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you create freedom. You create boundaries. You create space to grow. And sometimes, silence is the only response that leaves an impact. When someone tries to provoke you and you stay silent, you say everything without saying anything. You communicate that they don't have power over you, that their words don't move you, that you're not here to play games. That kind of silence speaks louder than any argument ever could, because it shows restraint, it shows discipline, and discipline always outlasts chaos. Think about the strongest people you've ever met, the ones who walk into a room and immediately shift the energy. They don't have to talk over anyone. They don't need to dominate the conversation. They have a presence that comes from being grounded, self-assured, and emotionally in control. That kind of presence doesn't need volume. It creates volume by contrast. While everyone else is speaking to be heard, they're choosing their moment, and when they finally speak, people lean in, because they've earned attention, not demanded it. Silence also gives you time to think, to observe, to calculate. In high-pressure situations, reacting too quickly is often what leads to mistakes. But silence gives you a buffer. It lets you process, it lets you respond rather than react. And in that pause, you often see what others miss. You notice tone, body language, inconsistencies, opportunities. You become sharper, more deliberate, more effective. This isn't about never speaking. It's about mastering when and how to speak. It's about knowing the weight of your words and understanding that if you speak all the time, nothing you say really lands. But when you speak with intention after observing, after thinking, after listening, your words carry more weight because they come from clarity, not chaos. They come from strength, not insecurity. Silence also separates you from the crowd. In a world full of noise, the quiet ones stand out, not because they're invisible, but because they're rare. When you don't overshare, when you don't react emotionally, when you carry yourself with quiet confidence, people notice. They may not always say it out loud, but they feel it, and often they respect it more than they respect loudness or ego. Because silence, when rooted in strength, signals something deeper. It signals discipline, control, self-awareness. There will be times when people misunderstand your silence. They'll think it's weakness, indifference, maybe even arrogance. Let them. You're not here to perform, you're here to win, and winning often requires silence. Not just to gather information, not just to avoid unnecessary battles, but to protect your mind, to protect your focus, to protect your mission. Because not everything deserves your voice, and when you realize that, you stop giving your power away for free. The most dangerous person in the room is the one who listens more than they speak, who watches, waits, moves with intention. That's someone who can't be manipulated, baited, or thrown off course. That's someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to make an impact. That's someone who wins without saying a word. Your energy is your most valuable currency. It fuels your thoughts, your decisions, your habits, your relationships, everything. And just like money, it can be spent wisely or squandered carelessly. The problem is, most people don't treat their energy with the level of respect and protection it deserves. They give it away freely to people who haven't earned it, to situations that don't serve them, to arguments that go nowhere, to distractions that drain rather than build. But when you start realizing how powerful your energy is, everything changes. Because you begin to see that your peace, your focus, and your emotional stability aren't things anyone else is entitled to. They are privileges, and you decide who gets access. Too many people walk around exhausted, irritated, and overwhelmed. Not because life is so hard, but because they've allowed too many people into their inner world. They say yes to everyone, engage with everything, and try to be everything for everyone. But being accessible to everyone means you're available to be used, pulled, drained, and manipulated by anyone. And that's a dangerous place to live from, constantly reacting, constantly depleted, constantly trying to reclaim a sense of self that keeps slipping through your fingers. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are doors with locks, and you hold the key. Not everyone deserves to sit at your table. Not everyone has earned the right to your time, your attention, your emotional bandwidth. When you allow people to constantly interrupt your peace, distract your focus, or pull you into emotional chaos, you're not being kind, you're being careless with yourself. It's not selfish to protect your energy, it's essential. Because when your energy is scattered, you can't think clearly, you can't show up fully, you can't grow, you're just surviving. But when your energy is preserved, you move with purpose, you build, you rise. Part of protecting your energy is learning to say no and mean it. Not out of anger, not out of coldness, but out of self-respect. Saying no doesn't make you rude, it makes you conscious of your limits. It means you know what you're available for and what you're not. Some people will not understand this. They'll accuse you of changing. They'll say you're being distant. Let them talk. You are changing. You are creating space for your next level, and not everyone can go with you. You're not here to please people. You're here to become the version of yourself that can't be shaken by guilt, pressure, or fear of disappointing others. There's a quiet kind of power that comes from being unavailable to the wrong things. You don't have to argue. You don't have to explain. You simply choose where your energy goes, and you do it with intention. Not everyone gets a response. Not every message gets your time. Not every invitation deserves a yes. And the more disciplined you become in protecting your energy, the more clarity you gain about what actually matters. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to pull back. To stop showing up for people who wouldn't notice if you didn't. To stop overextending for people who never reciprocate. You're not obligated to keep engaging in relationships or environments that leave you feeling empty. You owe it to yourself to stop leaking energy into places that don't feed your growth. That includes how you speak to yourself too, because it's not just about who you give your energy to, it's also about how you direct it inward. You can't pour energy into self-doubt, overthinking, regret, or fear and expect to thrive. You must learn to guard your inner dialogue as fiercely as you guard your outer environment. Energy flows where attention goes, and if your attention is locked on what's wrong, what's missing, or who hurt you, you'll stay stuck. But if you redirect your energy toward solutions, toward discipline, toward progress, you become unstoppable. This mindset shift isn't about becoming emotionally numb. It's about becoming emotionally mature. You can care without carrying. You can be kind without being drained. You can love without losing yourself. That's what real strength looks like, being deeply connected to your values, your purpose, and your peace, while still holding the line. People will respect the energy you protect. And if they don't, they were never meant to stay. So from this moment forward, make a decision. Your energy is sacred. It's not on sale. It's not up for negotiation. It's not available 24/7 to everyone who asks. Start treating it like it's the foundation of your life, because it is. And just like you wouldn't give away the keys to your house to a stranger, don't hand out access to your energy to people who haven't shown they know how to handle it with respect. You decide who gets access, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Not from fear, but from clarity. You get one life, one mind, one body, one mission. Guard it, honor it, and protect your energy like your future depends on it, because it does. When you master the art of guarding your energy, you stop living on defense and start living on purpose. You no longer waste time explaining your boundaries to people committed to crossing them. You no longer allow chaos to rent space in your peace. You choose who enters your mind, your emotions, and your life with clarity and conviction. This isn't about being cold, it's about being conscious, because your energy shapes your future. Every interaction, every conversation, every commitment either builds you or breaks you. So here's the truth. Not everyone deserves access. Not every voice deserves your attention. Not every situation deserves your reaction. The moment you stop handing out your energy like it's free is the moment you take your power back. And from that place, strong, steady, and unapologetically focused, nothing can stop you. Protect your peace, guard your power, and never forget, you don't owe access to anyone. You decide who gets in.